get started? I'm so thrilled to have such fellowship in this room today. But we're going to just take a minute to get started. Good afternoon and welcome to the Albert M. Greenfield and William T. Carter lecture series, and to the first lecture of this new series. I'm Vivian Gadsden, and I am the holder of the William T. Carter Chair here at the University of Pennsylvania. This is an important moment given the importance of this topic. But before I go any further, I would like to introduce the Dean of the Graduate School of Education, Dean Pamela Grossman, who is also the George and Diane Weiss Professor of Education. Dean Grossman is a distinguished scholar. Her work is widely known in teacher education, and her research focuses on the preparation of teachers and other professionals in issues of instructional quality, particularly in English language arts. Her most recent work focuses on practice-based teacher education and the role of core practices of teaching and teacher preparation and professional development. She co-directs the Core Practice Consortium, a consortium of faculty from 11 different institutions that has been investigating pedagogies useful for helping novices learn to teach. She was elected to the National Academy of Education in 2009, and most recently, in 2017, to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She is the chair of the board of the Spencer Foundation, and she is also serves on the board of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. Dean Grossman, whom I've known for a long time prior to her becoming our dean here, and that was a very lovely day when she said yes, coming from Stanford here, and formerly at the University of Washington, is known for the thought and care, in addition, obviously, to the intellectual work that she brings to our field. And so we are honored that she has taken the time to join us today and for trying to do such important works for our school and the university.
Thank you, Vivian. And of course, Vivian is one of the reasons I said yes. So in contrast to the events of the past few days, this is a day to celebrate people coming together, to support children, our youngest and most vulnerable citizens, as John Fantuzzo likes to say, and by extension, the future of our society as a whole. This program tonight itself is a testament to the power of partnerships. Partnerships between colleagues like John Fantuzzo and Vivian Gadsden, who have worked together for so long and who've combined the collective resources of their respective endowed chairs to put together an incredible program that's larger than the sum of its parts. To partnerships across schools at Penn, as the work that John and Vivian both do with their colleagues in the School of Social Practice and Policy and the School of Nursing through Penn Futures, that also is committed to improving the lives of children and their families. Work that harnesses the interdisciplinary power of the university on behalf of children. And to partnerships between Penn and the city of Philadelphia, as represented by a number of our panel members today. Only by working together can we support the next generation in reaching their full potential. And only by working together can we repair this world. So in my tradition, there's a cobbled together version of the teachings from Pirkei Avot, the teachings of their father, that seems very, very appropriate to opening this lecture today. It says, "Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. It is not incumbent upon you to complete the work, but neither are you at liberty to desist from it. We have a number of people in this room who live this saying every day. I want to thank the Albert M. Greenfield Association and the Greenfield family for their commitment to the work that we do here at Penn GSC, but also to improving the lives of people in Philadelphia and to children, and to the family of William T. Carter, who also contributed to this vision. But most of all today, I'm happy to turn this podium over to people who live this work every day, who work harder than you can ever imagine, working to rebuild and repair pathways for young people. John Fantuso, the Alfred M. Professor of Human Relations, and Vivian Gadsden, the William T. Carter Professor of Child Development and Education. Thank you.
So much, Dean Grossman. So just at this juncture, there are two things I want to do, but the first is I want to acknowledge the families who have been affected by the incident in Pittsburgh, and ask that you join me in wishing them the ability to deal with these difficult times and to share with them the complexity of this moment. And I have a happier task next, which is to bring attention to, first of all, my colleague John Fantuso, who you will hear later, but I want you just to stand even now. We have a long history. And because we've worked together so long, it's been this really kind of interesting talk back and forth about who would take one role, which role. John would say, oh, why don't you take? And then I would say, oh, why don't you take it? And we did that back and forth for the past month. But here we are. And so my role is to introduce the topic for today. But first, I'd like to introduce and honor our special guest. First, I'd like for the Greenfield family to stand and let us acknowledge you, please. And we don't have the Carter family here, but I have been in touch with the two previous holders of the Carter Chair. One is Lila Gleitman, who was a professor in psychology here at Penn, who is in ill health but sends her best regards. And then representing our beloved colleague in the Graduate School of Education for many, many years, and the previous holder of the Carter Chair, we have Bonnie Botel Shepard, who is the daughter of Morton Botel, who many of you Bonnie is taking care of the next generation of Botels, and will need to leave shortly. So thank you so much, Bonnie, for coming. We are at a critical juncture, I would say, in our stated commitments to supporting young children and their parents. And these are mapped against the will, our will, to act on our promises. When John and I decided to collaborate on the lecture, we drew from our years working together and our shared commitments and visions for preparing children for school and ensuring their well-being, recognizing that these children and their families are facing inequalities that both limit possibility and opportunity, but also have inherent strengths, and we have those strengths as well to make a difference. So the Albert M. Greenfield and William T. Carter Lecture Series is but a small part of placing these issues in the public square by focusing on young children and families facing segregated, disadvantaged, that reduces their possibilities for educational success. This 2018 lecture series addresses policy, research, and practice, and in particular this lecture today, on the question, what must we do at child, family, and community levels to promote school readiness and school success? The lecture has been established by John and by myself to highlight and seek solutions to the major problems facing young children and their families and communities. It builds upon, 25 years of collaboration with the City of Philadelphia, leaders from the City of Philadelphia, School District of Philadelphia, as well as national leaders, to enhance a vision between the leaders in Philadelphia and to support young children birth to age 8, as well as their families and communities. So this lecture is an opportunity to move our stated commitments and our inherent goals to the next level, we hope. It is, as well, the Dean mentioned this, being held in support of Penn Futures, which is an interdisciplinary and interprofessional partnership among the Graduate School of Education, the School of Social Policy and Practice, and the School of Nursing here at the University of Pennsylvania. So we have this enormous opportunity, we believe, at this moment in our local history and in our national history to make a difference. And we are thrilled to be able to have terrific colleagues who have agreed, and there wasn't too much twisting of arms, thank you, Tammy and Sam, to participate today. These are incredible leaders in our field, and we are so honored. So I'm going to introduce our two speakers, and John will introduce our distinguished local respondents. Our first speaker is Dr. Tammy Mann, who is president and CEO of the Campagna Center and has 25 years of work at all levels of policy and practice focused on addressing the needs of children and families, especially those in economically and socially challenged environments. She considers herself first and foremost a practitioner at heart and has had a long-standing interest in translating research to practice. Prior to her work at the Campagna Center, she served as executive director of the Frederick Patterson Research Institute and as deputy executive director at 0 to 3. She serves on several committees, and I am pleased to serve with her on some of those committees and boards, among them the Buffett Early Childhood Institute and the Foundation for Child Development. She is also chairman and former chairman and commissioner for Alexandria's Children, Youth and Families Collaborative Commission. After serving on the governing board of the National Association for the Education of Young Children, referred to as NAEYC, she was appointed president of that governing board for a 2-year term. And our second speaker is Dr. Samuel J. Mizels, fondly known as Sam Mizels, and he is the founding executive director of the Buffett Early Childhood Institute at the University of Nebraska and holds the Richard D. Holland Presidential Chair in Early Childhood Development. He came to Nebraska in 2013 after more than 11 years as president of the Erickson Institute, which many of you know is the nation's foremost graduate school in child development, and a 21-year distinguished career as a professor at the University of Michigan School of Education, where I met him. He was 15 and I was 10, maybe. At Michigan, he was also a research scientist at the Center for Human Growth and Development, where he conducted and developed assessments for birth to 8 years old that are widely used throughout the U.S. and abroad. Earlier, he was a professor at the Department of Child Study at Tufts University and director of the Elliott Pearson Children's School, as well as senior advisor in early childhood development for the Developmental Evaluation Clinic of Boston Children's Hospital. Sam was president of the board of directors of 0 to 3, the National Center for Infants, Toddlers, and Families. He's lectured broadly throughout the U.S. and abroad, and is an advisor and consultant for numerous local, state, and national organizations, including the Office of Head Start, the National Academies of Sciences, state departments of education, foundations, public policy groups, and school districts. These are just outstanding people, and I am so happy that you said yes. Tammy.
All righty. Well, first of all, thank you, Vivian. Let me express my deep appreciation to both you and John for the opportunity to come out and participate in such an important conversation in the company of individuals that I've been honored to know for much of my professional career. Sam is someone I met as a graduate student, and I've had the great pleasure of maintaining a connection to him over the course of many years, and certainly being able to participate with these other distinguished individuals who will be on our panel. As I consider what I can contribute to the conversation this evening, I thought it best to start with, first of all, congratulating those of you who have devoted the time and energy to the very important work that is underway here in Philadelphia, where you're wanting to make 6,500 new preschool seats available by 2021, a step that marks important progress on the path to helping make certain more children in Philadelphia have a chance for success in school. I suspect that if I were to engage many of those who were involved in advocating to help design policy and advocate in building the will needed to use a tax strategy to get to this point, few of you would say you got here overnight. Advancing a vision of wanting to see more children realize their full potential takes hard work over many years on the part of families, schools, and communities. And it really is against this backdrop that I'd like to share with you a few thoughts about what you want to keep in mind as you advance this important agenda forward. I have entitled my talk, "There Are No Quick Fixes on the Path to Helping More Children Living in Poverty Succeed." And I think this is an incredibly important point, because sometimes in our culture, in our country, we want quick fixes. We don't understand that the work we must do is not easy work. It is important work. It is work that must be done. But it's not quick. Preschool is not a panacea, and it shouldn't be on the hook for demonstrating impacts in isolation of other inputs across a person's lifespan. It's simplistic and not reflective of what I believe is in the best interest of children, and I know that Sam is going to have an opportunity to unpack this a bit more as he sort of looks to some of the research that speaks to fade out. In the short time that I have with you, there are really 3 points that I'd like to cover. The first focuses on situating preschool in a broader framework to drive positive outcomes for children. The second really focuses on the issue of workforce capacity and what it takes to do this work. And the third point gets at really looking at using data to drive action, learning, and continuous improvement. As I address these areas, I hope to integrate references to our own work in Alexandria and other national initiatives where relevant. Before I get to this first point, though, I do want to provide some context, because I believe context matters as you're trying to understand and situate perspective on what I hope to share with you. I want to talk a little bit about, really just very briefly, the work we're doing at the Campagna Center in our local community context. The Campagna Center is an organization that was founded almost 75 years ago, and the work is organized around really wanting to see impact in 3 core areas: helping young children enter school ready to learn, supporting their academic and social success as they move through their K-12 experiences, and helping adults achieve or realize their goals that foster self-sufficiency. Here are some quick facts about the center at a very high level. This year, we have an operating budget of about $14 million. There are over 200 employees that work in 52 classrooms across the city of Alexandria as a result of partnerships that we have with our school system, the faith community, our community college, and more recently, housing developers. Alexandria, the programs that we operate do span what I'd like to affectionately call cradle to career. So among our early childhood offerings, we do serve over 500 children ages 0 to 5 in a mix of settings. So we are delivering home-based services. We're working with a network of family child care providers. We also provide center-based service as a part of our work with young children. And we're doing that utilizing resources across a variety of funding streams that include federal, state, local, and some fee-based resources. Our elementary and secondary programs are designed to engage children and youth in a variety of after-school and enrichment programs. We serve an economically and culturally diverse population. And finally, our work with adults in our early childhood program, given our work with Head Start, is certainly too generational, and the support that we're providing for parents around supporting their children's development as well as some of their own educational and workforce goals. We also operate a program that targets English language learners. We have 9 levels of English language instruction offered across 2 semesters, 13 weeks a semester, 3 hours a day, with childcare support for those adults who are participating, a third of whom are women who otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity without those supports. The city of Alexandria is a part of the Northern Virginia region, adjacent to Washington, D.C., and several surrounding counties in Maryland. It's densely populated. There are 15 square miles in the city, with a current population of about 160,000 residents in distinct neighborhoods, some of which the names are referenced here on this slide. Median income is currently $89,200, well above the U.S. median income. 94% of our residents have graduated high school, 61% having obtained bachelor's degrees. Alexandria's overall poverty rate is just under 10%, but among children, 34% are living between 100 and 200% of poverty. In terms of our race and ethnicity profile, 61% of our residents report being Caucasian, 22% Black, African American, 6% Asian, 7% other, and 16% reporting being Hispanic or Latino. 3 of 4 people over 16 participate in the labor force. Alexandria's current employment rate is 3.1%. 1 percentage points below the national average at 3.1%, and nearly 60% of those who are employed are working in management, business, science, and art occupations, followed by sales, office, and service-related occupations. From a fiscal perspective, I'm going to go back 1 slide really quickly. The city operates on a $750 million budget, with residential taxes contributing the largest share of revenues to fund our services at 34%, followed by commercial property tax at 26% and local taxes at 25%. Nearly 30% of the city's budget goes to fund public schools. Some of you might wonder, what on earth is she doing here talking to us in Philadelphia, given that city's profile? I'm glad you asked. Despite the city's health and wealth profile, our community is currently experiencing many of the same challenges facing a number of urban communities when it comes to truly how well our children faring. This next map that I shifted to a little bit too soon highlights where much of the city's wealth is situated. So if you look to the east or to my right, you'll note the shades are darker. That's where there is more concentrated wealth, though within even the east side of the city, as it's called, there are certainly pockets of extreme poverty. To the west side of the city, we have far more residents that are living in poverty in our community. Furthermore, 18% of our school-age children live in poverty. 63% of students in our public schools qualify for free and reduced price lunch. Minorities make up the majority of our student population. Last year, 41% of all of the students in our district were English language learners, with over 120 languages represented among our district's population. Over the last 7 years, our school district has had 4 superintendents. This past year, we had over 250 teachers hired in order for the schools to be fully staffed. Achievement gaps are evident when test scores are disaggregated by race and other factors. And the dropout rate is 10.4%, twice the state's average. When I accepted the opportunity to serve at the center nearly 7 years ago, I admit I thought it would be relatively easy to put more children on a path for school success, given the resources of the city. For its part, the Campagna Center had been around for a long time, and it was well positioned to contribute in meaningful ways to achieving this goal. Needless to say, I have been humbled by the reality of being on the ground and living this work. It is a lot easier to talk about what it means to translate research to practice than it is to do in real-world, non-laboratory, highly controlled environments where resources are stretched, and 87% of our residents are actually without children in their homes. The work is intellectually and physically demanding for teachers and other professionals working on the front lines, a point I'll return to as I talk about the importance of workforce capacity. So given that, you've got the context, I'd like to shift to talking a little bit more about the importance of situating preschool in a broader context as you undertake this work. All right, I'll start by affirming what I know you all know, and that is a child's prenatal and subsequent experiences in the early years of life provides the foundation for all of learning and development. And eradicating the pernicious effects of poverty, especially deep and persistent poverty on children, demands a framework and an approach that includes and extends well beyond preschool at 4. Recently, I had the pleasure of hearing Greg Duncan speak to this point at a talk in Denver, where he emphasized, the importance of early education is certainly without a doubt critical to this broad point of view, but we also need to be focused on the economic, employment, and parenting supports that exist, along with understanding access to health care and the quality of our children's experiences in K-12 situations, if more are going to succeed. In Alexandria, we have situated our desire to expand access to early learning with the prenatal to birth framework, and it is under this auspices that an early childhood education work group has been formed to do this work. Our work has been guided by adhering to an overarching set of principles that really anchor how we approach our work. Children and families, we believe, are at the heart of everything we do. Together, we are building a system of care that is family and child-centric. This is a community-wide effort. We need to actively engage parents, community members, voters, funders, and other partners through a unified voice. Everyone values and respects each other's contributions. We embrace the fact that we are a mixed delivery system, and we actively seek to have different perspectives at the table. We're committed to results, and these principles provided the framework or the foundation for creating a common agenda that we've used to organize our work. And this next slide really depicts the elements of that common agenda. I'll talk a little bit about each of them. The glass doors really refers to this idea of transparent access. Given the diversity that lives in our community, it's vital that we really focus on how we're communicating with parents so that those who have language barrier issues are able to understand where they can access such services. The need to make certain that we are linking what we're doing to both 0 to 3 and what happens as kids transition into kindergarten through 3rd grade is vitally important. We're focused on quality environments. It's not just about what's happening at our organization, it's about all of the providers who are participating together with our public schools and wanting to make certain that all children, regardless of where they're being situated, are being exposed to quality early learning experiences. We're focusing on aligning our policy and funding such that we can better leverage resources to better serve families, strengthening our access to data on children across programs, which can be really scary for organizations to buy into, and building community engagement to support the work. Some of the things we've been able to accomplish to date include some modest improvements in access. We are definitely focused on looking at our own community data and using that to drive our strategy for expanding services and focusing on quality. And you see listed there a couple of studies that we have underway, or we've completed and that we have underway to get at this. We've been able to make information more accessible for families. We're publishing materials in 4 languages, the 4 primary languages that reflect the language of the families in our community that need to have access to these services. We're involved in joint professional development activities with our school partners. It's very, very important to underscore the need to make certain that we are not working in silos. And because we are working together, we've been able to leverage our dollars and bring in training from places that as individual organizations we'd never be able to afford to do. And so we're stretching our ability to make certain that we're providing access to quality. And then of course we're producing annual reports that really talk about our progress to keep our community informed. Reaching consensus on our common agenda wasn't easy. I certainly thought the small geography would sort of provide a scaffold on which to build, but the reality is, I think in small communities, the level of entrenchment that exists around really protecting your territory was a formidable obstacle that we needed to overcome. There were participants in our work group that were a little angry about the school's involvement because they had not been involved for many years in addressing the needs of children prior to formal school entry at kindergarten. We were really lacking a foundation of trust that's necessary to do this work. And to that point, I actually thought I would just include this trust quotient mathematical sort of presentation, because honestly, having this unpacked in a way that people could really begin to define what is getting in the way of our being able to truly build the trust and the courage needed to do this work, this seemed to help, because it really helped to unpack particularly elements related to our ability to create the kind of intimacy that allow people to be honest about the things they were afraid of and where they were worried that if they gave a little here, it would sort of adversely affect something else on the other side. The self-focus versus the common goal focus, spending a lot of time really challenging ourselves to get out of our own way and understand unless we could rally around something bigger than each of us individually, we were not going to succeed in building the kind of trust that was needed. We were very fortunate in our community to have a family foundation that really believed in the importance and power of collaboration, and they devoted resources to our effort to build a table of trust that has allowed us to, I think, experience some of the accomplishments that our work has involved. And I know that without it, we would not be as far along as we are in our process. So let's talk to the second point, building the workforce. Now, I thought I'd share by highlighting 2 resources that provide perspective on the status of the early care and education workforce. The first is a report that was released in 2015. I'm sure many of you are aware of it. The National Academy of Sciences released a seminal synthesis about the workforce and made a clarion call that the workforce needed to be transformed and transformed quickly in order to help ensure more children high-quality early learning experiences. And one of the most talked about recommendations on the slide, you see there I can't remember, 13 or 14 recommendations, but one of the most talked about recommendations was the need to move in a direction where all lead teachers working with children ages 0 to 8 would have a bachelor's degree. And time prevents me from unpacking the report, but I do want to say that NAEYC, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, along with 14 other national organizations, have convened a task force focused on operationalizing these recommendations. And there's also a collaborative network of funders looking at how they can provide support that would advance the goals that are reflected here. This work has been named Power to the Profession, and if you want to learn more about its components, I invite you to visit NACCE's website, and if any of you are going to the conference in DC in a couple of weeks, I'm certain there are going to be sessions there that talk about the progress of that work. The second data source I'd like to highlight comes from the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment at UC Berkeley, work that Marcy Whitebook has done. In 2016, she launched an early childhood index to describe the overall state of the workforce along 3 dimensions: earnings and economic security, early childhood workforce policy, and family income supports. This index is updated every 2 years, and in 2008, she released another version, and this slide provides a snapshot of what we know about the early childhood education workforce across the United States, and I've also brought along information about Pennsylvania's current situation, which I'm sure you are aware of. The components of this index are defined here, where we're talking about work environments, financial resources, qualifications. Here we're focusing on whether bachelor's degrees exist as the minimum requirements for lead teachers, directors, if CDAs are minimum requirements for those who are working as assistant teachers, are there resources to pay for scholarships? The workforce data gets at to what extent are states capturing information about wages, benefits, and the demographic profiles. And compensation, of course, gets at to what extent are there standards or guidelines that have been articulated in either earmarks or other public funding streams that are needed to help support the workforce. And not surprisingly, nationally, we're doing somewhat of a decent job collecting data that helps to describe the workforce, with more than half of all states making headway. But we are stalled when it comes to finding ways to address more complex issues like compensation and other financial resources. And I do believe there is danger in requiring more without addressing the issues like compensation and financial support, something that I hope we can talk about further. When we look at Pennsylvania's profile, you see that you are rated as edging forward in terms of qualifications, primarily because scholarship support is available for pursuing credentials and degrees. However, lead teachers, preschool teachers, and center directors are not required to have BAs as their minimum degree requirement, and assistant teachers are not required to have Child Development Associate credential or its equivalent. The second table on this slide summarizes median wage data taken from the Occupational Employment Statistics as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the 2007 median wage has not changed since 2015 for child care workers. For preschool teachers, there's been a 1% increase since 2015. For center directors, there's actually been a 1% decrease since 2015. It's also worth noting that 50% of child care workers' families participate in one or more public income support programs. If it's any consolation, Virginia is stalled in all areas other than workforce data, where we are rated as making headway, and 51% of our child care workforce are participating in public support programs. Delivering on the promise to expand access to preschool by 6,500 seats will require a massive focus on identifying and recruiting teachers and assistant teachers. I'm sure this is on the minds of the commission members guiding this important work in Philadelphia. I just sort of looked at a 1-to-10 adult-child ratio and came up with about 361 teachers and assistant teachers, not to include support staff and directors and the like. Since you all are taking a phased approach to implementing targeted universal access, you'll obviously have a chance to discuss whether it makes sense to embed these seats in schools or community settings, and I'm imagining that data on your local capacity is going to drive that approach. Certainly in our community, when preschool was rolled out in '94, our local school district did not elect to participate, and for 17 years it was really the community providers that took on the responsibility of making sure children in our community who needed access weren't left behind. I actually felt it was a positive development when our schools got involved because it meant more children could be served. The sad fact was many community providers did not have the space or could not muster up the resources that were required to really fill that gap. As we have grown in our capacity to serve more children, we've also grown in our knowledge and understanding about how important it is to make sure that we are supporting teachers in the work. Teachers are feeling very overwhelmed these days as there are mounting expectations on what we're expecting them to be able to know and do without always having the resources needed to do that. We are fortunate in that our Department of Community and Human Services funds a preschool prevention team that pushes in mental health supports into our preschool classrooms, adding an additional buffer for teachers as they are working with children and families that require more involved support. Our resources actually in this area don't go far enough. There is a critical shortage of mental health providers who are focused on early childhood mental health. We know that environment matters, and as you build out your capacity to take the time needed to make sure you understand the profile of children in your families, looking at things like coaching and ensuring that there are truly paid breaks, paid time for planning, all of these elements contribute to the work environment and enable teachers to do their best work. How are we on time? I'm out of time. There it is. Well, I was looking for you over here. Sorry, I didn't look to my right here. Let me just say, I look forward to having some time in the Q&A to talk a little bit more about the data question and sharing just some parting thoughts as I allow my colleagues their due time to share with you this afternoon. So, thank you. Instructions on what to do, and I got it down. PC. No, right screen. And something should magically appear. Yay. Boom.
Thank you. Thanks, Tammy. I need to explain that I'm not standing because I'm facing some spinal surgery before long, and so I can't stand that long. It takes any kind of mobility problem for you to recognize what it's like to be disabled, even if it's short term. I do want to thank Dean Grossman and the Greenfield family and the Carter Endowment, and of course Vivian and John for their invitation. It really is a pleasure to be here and an honor to be part of this. I'm going to talk to you today about why pre-K has a fade-out problem. For nearly 50 years, fade-out has been an issue for early childhood. The first so-called fade-out study that I know of was the 1969 Westinghouse follow-up of Head Start. This study, which claimed that the gains of 1 or 2 years of Head Start were lost by third grade. Remember, in 1969, Head Start had been in existence for 4 years and never had been there before that. So this study claimed that the gains of 1 or 2 years of Head Start were lost by third grade, and it was widely criticized for a host of reasons, not the least its sole focus on cognitive outcomes to the total exclusion of anything else, as well as its attribution of fade-out impacts to Head Start, rather than to the possible role played by subsequent primary school activity or quality. So as you'll see, these kinds of issues haven't changed very much over the years. They remain central to many of the more recent studies of preschool effects that make claims of fade-out. Today I have 4 issues I want to discuss with you. I want to cover with you kind of briefly. First, I want to get clear about what the fade-out studies are alleging. Second, I want to highlight some of the life challenges of the children who are participants in these studies. Third, I'd like to spend some time explaining the importance of the line in care and education across the first 8 years of life. And finally, I want to share some of the work that we're doing in Nebraska that's designed to overcome most of the problems that I attribute to earlier studies of fade-out. So let's begin by reviewing what the fade-out studies allege. By far the most extensively studied fade-out program concerns the Perry Preschool Project. This project may be the best known preschool intervention study in the field of child development. Intended to have an impact on the achievement of children living in poverty, it consisted of a random assignment of 123 3- and 4-year-olds from a low-income African-American community in Ypsilanti, Michigan, near Detroit. All of the children had initial IQs of 75 to 85, which is in the range of mild mental impairment. Half went into the treatment group, and the other half went into the control, which meant that they had no preschool at all. Those in the treatment group received 4 days a week of cognitively oriented preschool with a very good teacher-child ratio and 1 day of home visiting. The children were studied until they reached their 40s. More has been written about these children than probably any other group of children who were ever enrolled in preschool. I lived in that area for 21 years, and it was in the Ypsilanti news. I mean, everyone knew what was going on here. So it was a little bit of contagion. All right. What you see here is really worth thinking about. It shows initial gains for the treatment children, and then a dramatic fall-off, perhaps a regression to the mean. You see this particularly when we compare the treatment group to the controls. In every way, this looks like the gains of those in the experimental group have disappeared, and that's how it was interpreted. But as you all know, those of you who have been studying this area at all, long-term studies of the treatment children show that they outperformed the controls on academic achievement and in graduation from high school, reduced criminal activity, fewer adolescent births, better health, and so forth and so on. So, in fact, the Perry study led us to start thinking about sleeper effects, impacts no one could originally have predicted, a bit like sleeper agents, for any of you who are fans of the TV show Homeland. We define them as follows. Long-term outcomes that emerge later in life and provide a stable foundation for subsequent performance. The important idea here is not that there are sleeper effects per se, but what the sleeper effects seem to be. The sleeper effects from the Perry Project seem to be of various kinds. For one, we've learned that preschool does give a significant cognitive or academic boost to its participants when it's measured more accurately by assessments of achievement rather than by IQ. With the Perry Project, these effects appeared some years later. But what we also know is that high-quality preschool can do something else, something of incredible value. It can improve children's non-cognitive abilities. These abilities, mentioned often by Jim Hackman, refer to self-control, persistence, and self-regulation, among others. It's these characteristics which many believe may be more malleable, more flexible, or open to intervention, and more powerful than general intelligence that seem to be the most important predictors of success in school and in life. Built over the first 8 years of life, they enlarge our perspective from a focus simply on early intervention to a broad emphasis on early learning. The problem is that nearly all policymakers and many others are unwilling to gamble on sleeper effects. After all, they're not going to be in office that long.
or wait so long for the evidence of success in school and later on in life. They want immediate results, and that's where many of the problems of fade out in pre-K begin. For example, here's an illustration of policymakers' need for immediate results. This based on Head Start. Federal report finds scant scientific evidence for the effectiveness of Head Start programs. This commentary includes a report on the federal Head Start impact study of the early 2000s, a randomized experimental study of nearly 4,700 3- and 4-year-old children whose parents applied for Head Start and were randomly assigned either to a treatment group, that is Head Start, or a control group that was not offered Head Start, but could participate in other local preschool programs if slots were available. To say the least, this study, which was marked by significant fade out by the end of first grade, had numerous methodological problems, not the least being that many families in the so-called control group enrolled their children in preschool and some even in Head Start. So these Head Start programs that they enrolled in were not part of the study. Treatment and control obviously became inextricably confounded. Although this study was often described in the popular press as further proof that Head Start gains are fleeting and transitory, proof of that kind is not supported by this study. More recently, there's been a lot of press and publicity about the Vanderbilt study that purports to show that gains from pre-K programs for 4-year-olds in Tennessee fade out by the time the children reach 3rd grade. That's what this Brookings paper, authored by Russ Whitehurst, is about. Again, many objections can be raised about this study. For example, what the quality of the pre-K programs in the Vanderbilt study was, given that Tennessee's per pupil pre-K expenditures are quite low, what the effect was on the findings of having parents of only 1/3 of the eligible participants give permission to be part of the study, and especially whether the quality of the 1st through 3rd grade teaching was consistently at a high level. A recent reanalysis has come out that has shown that quality in the primary grades matters. This study showed that better teaching quality in years subsequent to pre-K was associated with more persistent positive pre-K effects. Of course, researchers are very concerned about the methodological problems I've just enumerated. This is not only because these problems distort the true value of pre-K, but because they can also lead to simplistic and uninformed conclusions like those you see here. And bear in mind that the problem described as fade out is not just of interest to educators and policy wonks like me. Governors, federal and state senators and representatives and other public figures are confused and concerned about this research, and they bring it up frequently. As a result, we see articles like this more and more often. By the way, this piece was written by someone whose column is syndicated in 245 newspapers nationwide. I believe that fade out is in many respects a red herring. It's a false issue. And I'll give you 2 reasons to support that claim. First, too much is expected of 1 or 2 years of pre-K, given the children and family most in need of early intervention. And second, too little is provided to support those children and those families. Specifically, I contend that brief 1 or 2 year interventions for young children raised in poverty are not enough. In fact, it's reasonable to assume that while early investments in children placed at risk may be a necessary condition for overcoming those risks, it's unreasonable to suggest that 1 or 2 years of pre-K is sufficient for overcoming the type of risks these children and families experience. These programs must begin early in the first 3 years of life and persist longer, at least through grade 3, or the impacts of the earlier intervention are likely to fade. The important point here is that we're dealing with investments and not with inoculations. There are no magic bullets or simple solutions for overcoming the effects of severe poverty and adverse childhood experiences endured by those who are participants in these programs. Let's take a quick look at just some of the challenges poverty poses for the developing child. Not long ago, Jane Walfogel of Columbia University and several colleagues released a cross-national study of the academic achievement of children living in poverty, compared U.S. children with children living in Australia, Canada, and the UK. Results from more than 8,000 young people in these 4 countries paint a deeply disturbing picture of the multiple risks encountered by poor children all around the globe. They found, as the Russell Sage Foundation notes, that the social inequalities that children experience before they start school contribute to a large gap in test scores between low and high SES students later in life. Across these countries, many children from low SES backgrounds lack books, high-quality childcare, and other goods and services that foster the environment necessary for cognitive growth. The study contends that these children are already more than a year behind children of well-educated parents on the first day of kindergarten. As some say, these kids are behind at the starting gate. But not only is a child's academic success tied deeply to his or her family background, this class-based achievement gap does not narrow as the child proceeds through school. In fact, it widens. And of the 4 countries studied, the U.S. has the most pervasive achievement gaps and the least social mobility of all. In addition to social inequalities, children in poverty are exposed to a wide range of biologically based negative impacts. Recent studies provide powerful evidence, as noted by the Journal of the American Medical Association, of growing up in poverty, of the tangible detrimental effects of growing up in poverty on brain development and related academic outcomes in childhood. In the largest study of its kind, published in the journal Nature Neuroscience in March of 2015, neuroscientists explored the biological relationship of children's behavior and learning and family socioeconomic status. They performed MRIs on the brains of 1,099 children, adolescents, and young adults aged 3 to 20 from several U.S. cities, and they mapped each child's genetic background in order to control for differences in ethnicity. A report in the Scientific American about this study says that the brains of children from the lowest income bracket had up to 6% less surface area than did the brains of children from families in the highest income bracket. In children from the poorest families, income disparities of just a few $1,000s were associated with major differences in brain structure, particularly in areas linked to language and decision-making skills. Children's scores on cognitive tests of reading and memory also declined as parental income went down. It's no wonder that the neuropsychologist Charles Nelson says that exposure to early life adversity should be considered no less toxic than exposure to lead, alcohol, or cocaine. These findings, like those of many other studies, suggest the need, just as Tammy did earlier today, to look at the effects of poverty from an ecological or systemic point of view, rather than as a phenomenon that lends itself to unitary or singular solutions. Here we see how poverty can shape children's lives by affecting their relationship with their environments. We all know that poverty serves as a marker or a proxy for a range of risk factors, so it's not surprising that it affects not just individuals, but families, neighborhoods, and local labor markets as well. Disruption and dissolution of these social contexts can have direct impacts on children's skill acquisition and educational attainments, and can also have indirect effects by influencing how schools operate. Low family income makes it more difficult for parents to gain access to high-quality childcare that prepares children for kindergarten. It can also lead to classrooms filled with less prepared teachers and low-achieving classmates with limited executive function and self-control. In this way, child educational attainment can be depressed from early childhood through adulthood. And all of this has a very significant impact on why maintenance of gains in early childhood is such a problem. My contention is that fade out is best thought of as a reduction or loss of social and institutional commitment, not a loss of children's individual skills. Paul Reveille, a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, puts it this way: would any of us with privilege think of providing an intensive, comprehensive education and care program for our children for 2 years, then neglect them for 10 years, and eventually expect them to be just fine at the end of that period? Yet that's how early care and education policy is structured for many children living in poverty in this nation. We deliver 1 or 2 years of intervention and then expect significant change. It's clear to me that we need to reconceptualize how the skills we're trying to build in young children are formed, because the model I just described is not it. Jim Heckman, a professor of economics and Nobel Prize recipient, and only Nobel Prize recipient I've ever had lunch and dinner with, because we both live in Chicago. Jim Heckman and his colleagues at Chicago described this task as the technology of skill production. They contend that skills produced at one stage augment the skills attained at later stages. Skills are interactive. Acquiring one, we all know this, think about your own experience. Acquiring one can lead to the acquisition of others and to change in those early skills. But if the process of skill development is foreshortened, the potential inherent in that initial skill may be lost and later learnings diminished. I'm going to give you a homely example, a simple example. Like many of you, I took music lessons as a boy. I was a violinist for the first 20 years of my life. And like many children, I resisted learning my scales, and I hated practicing them over and over. But as I became more proficient, the skills I acquired from practicing those skills became part of my growing musical technique. In a way, the more challenging the music became later on, the more I used, profited from, and internalized the skills I acquired at an earlier time. Moreover, whenever I returned to those early exercises, though I never liked playing scales, I discovered that they seemed to be altered. They were changed. They weren't so hard after all, by what I had learned later. In the oft-quoted words of Heckman, skills beget skills, abilities beget abilities. Skill investment at different ages support and bolster each other. They're synergistic, they're self-productive, and they multiply over time. The idea that we can teach something to a 3 or 4-year-old raised in poverty and then assume that our work is done flies in the face of reality and of how skills are produced. Technically, what I'm describing is called dynamic complementarity. Skills produced at one stage, whether cognitive or non-cognitive, raise the productivity or generativity of skills that are learned at another stage. We can't become proficient at most anything by stopping after the introductory class. And if the instructor is doing the right thing, the intermediate class builds on the beginner's class, and the next class builds on that one. Each change precedes and follows from the other, but this is not strictly an additive or an ordinal process. I'm not saying that everything we learn lines up hierarchically. Rather, what we learn at one time in life can change what we learn later, sometimes in unexpected and surprising ways. And that's why quality is not just a preschool issue, it's an issue that follows a child through the primary grades. In short, the gains from early interventions are only fully sustained when they're followed by high-quality learning experiences from birth through at least grade 3. In the absence of this cascade of potentially positive effects, skill acquisition itself is placed at risk. The evidence of fade-out follows from this and supports this simple observation. If children go from high-quality pre-K programs into poorly functioning elementary programs, the foundation that has been developed, it has a high probability of certainly collapsing. When skills produced at one stage are followed up, supported, and extended, the likelihood of new skills and new capacities being acquired increases. This perspective on human development is at the heart of the Buffett Early Childhood Institute's theory of knowledge and theory of change. Begun in 2013 with a founding gift from Susie Buffett and matching investments from the university and other sources, the Buffett Institute is a 4-campus, multidisciplinary research practice, policy, and outreach center devoted to promoting the development and learning of children at greatest risk from birth through age 8. Our vision is that Nebraska will become the best place in the nation to be a baby. And we're on our way. We believe that if we can make this the best place to be a baby, we can truly change the trajectory of life for kids in greatest need, for the state, and ultimately for the nation. I want to take a few moments, and I have 30 seconds, but maybe they'll give me a little bit more. They probably won't pull me off. I'm a disabled person now, so just very, very quickly to give you the outlines of a birth to grade 3 model that we've implemented in the Metro Omaha area. And this is something that we call the Superintendent's Early Childhood Plan. It's the largest birth to grade 3 demonstration program in the nation. It covers 12 schools serving children from low-income families located in 11 school districts. We have 156 children in home visiting, 182 pre-K to grade 3 classrooms with nearly 3,600 pre-K to grade 3 children involved in this. We begin with home visiting for birth to age 3, then move on to high-quality preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds, where families are supported in transitioning their children out of home visiting into a school-based pre-kindergarten or community-based preschool. A family facilitator continues the family support and educational activities initiated during the first 3 years of home visiting. Then comes aligned pre-K through grade 3. And then this is followed, of course, by a whole range of activities designed to promote academic, intellectual, and social-emotional development during this 4 to 5 year period. As with home visiting and pre-K, strong homeschool partnerships and family support are combined with a high-quality, rigorous educational approach. All of this with the school as hub. The school is the connector. The school reaches out to the community and brings the community in from birth onwards. We believe that there are enormous benefits that can come from this. Here we see some of them, all of which are connected to our theory of change. This list highlights the direct benefits to the wide range of critical actors we've identified: children, their families, teachers, schools, and communities. Our hypothesis, our overriding hypothesis, is that persistence of effort will yield persistence of effect. The evidence assures us that the earlier we begin working with children and families placed at risk, and the more persistent, consistent, and well-designed our efforts are, the more likely it is that children will be launched on a path towards life success And fade out will be replaced by growth and development. As Jeff Madrick and other economic policy commentators have noted, the research is now undeniable. Inequality in America begins at birth or before. Through no fault of their own, up to 1/4 of American children start off well behind. Armed with the unambiguous findings of 21st century neuroscience, we can no longer just tell children raised poor to study harder and find jobs when they grow up. A nation that needs all of its citizens to be productive workers and that promises a fair and dignified life to all, regardless of race or color, must now turn to its attention to this enormous pool of poor children. We can't solve this problem with only a year or two of pre-K. This is a much larger task, and it is one we cannot hope to realize with half measures. The growth and development of children born into severe poverty presents us with a complex set of tasks that calls for a comprehensive set of services, beginning at birth with the child's family and continuing through 3rd grade or beyond, with quality all along the way. Stopping short of this is just another way of shorting children of their potential. And beginning late means that children and families have to catch up. Yet children living in poverty have few opportunities to catch up and little time to waste. Remember, whatever fade out is, it is a problem of social commitment, not one of childhood skill deficit. It's time to make a commitment to do the right thing right now for all our children. Thank you.
Okay, I want to ask Mike and Carol if you could come up, find yourself a comfortable seat. I want us to thank Tammy and Sam for their thoughtful and compelling presentation. Very compelling logic, right? Children actually grow up, and their growing up is cumulative and progressive. And if we care about children growing up, we're going to continually be there to help them grow up well. Very compelling logic, and it's like a dumb moment for us as we think of the policies. But what's underlying this dumb moment are the hydras in the complexities of actually where we are at in implementing programs and policies in the real world of complex places. One of them we are committed to is Philadelphia. And we are very, very honored to have two of our distinguished colleagues here to respond to these presentations. Two distinguished colleagues who have very unique perspectives. The managing director of the city of Philadelphia, who reports to the mayor, Mike DeBernardinis, and the executive director of First Up Champions for Early Childhood Education, Carol Austin. They represent distinct perspectives as we get into the Gordian knot sometimes of where we're between the public's commitment and investment and the kids' needs, and then working with the challenges of the practitioners who are faced with the hands that touch, who are the hands that touch the little hands. Mike DeBernardinis, the managing director, has a distinguished record of service to this city. He has served in many, many capacities. He's currently now oversees and coordinates the activities for major operating departments of the city. He's in charge of and supervises all of the human services in the city. He has served at so many different posts in the city. He was basically Deputy Mayor of Environmental Community Resources. He has served in terms of recreational director. He has a portfolio that has included service and commitment to the Free Public Library of Philadelphia. He has worked in roles and coordinated closely with the school district. Mike really knows Philadelphia really, really well. And he also, in this current position that he has, he's been really in some ways the belly of the beast in reference to the city. So he's uniquely qualified to give us his perspective. Carol is in an amazing role. She serves as in the organization First Up, which was formerly the Delaware Valley Association of Education for Young Children. This is a nonprofit organization funded in 1968 that champions what Sam was talking about, high quality early care and education for all children from birth to age 8 in southeastern Pennsylvania. Carol oversees a team of over 24 early childhood education professionals, highly regarded in the region for providing best-in-class training, effective advocacy, accessible technical assistance, meant to give educators and advocates specialized tools to transform the lives of our youngest learners. So these two dear souls have been listening to our compelling speakers, and they now sit in these seats to respond. And I'm sure that they have many, many things going through their heads. And I don't believe we're going to give them adequate time to respond to what they've been stimulated. But I want you to give a hand for both of them, please. And that's because of the challenging task you have. We want to encourage you. And so I'm going to start with Mike, and then we'll have Carol close it. Mike?
Thank you, and I guess it's evening. Good evening, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be here and to participate in this forum. To try to respond to both Tammy and Sam's presentations, which were just wonderful and enlightening to me. I want to talk about local control and frame out what this administration has taken on relative to our responsibility and accountability for public education here in the city, and frame out how we're doing that, and a little bit of the politics involved in that. I have a broad range of responsibilities in the government. I am at heart an organizer and a practitioner, and I learn. I like data, but other people do that, and I like sort of research and sort of long-term look at things, but my job is to get things done, and I take that very seriously, so I'll try to, in a smaller framework. So the mayor has basically said to the citizens of this city that the success of our children is on us. It's on him, and it's on the city council, and it's on the men and women who serve in this administration and the broad civic community of Philadelphia. State's done. We're done with them. We're taking responsibility. And we should be done with them. But number two is that we need to not just declare that, but we need to fund this venture. So the mayor took on Big Soda, and I think if you guys are from Philly here, you know that we had a fight with Big Soda, put down $12 million to defeat the soda tax, which is already giving health benefits to the citizens of the city. And we're using that money to do three things: to fund pre-K, high-quality pre-K, 5,500 new slots by 2023. 2,250 of them will be in place at the end of this school year. We're not only providing more, but we're providing better. So we're committed to building quality in those slots and moving 1 and 2 programs in the 1 or 2 stars to 3 and 4 stars, and we're building incentives and support to do that. We're also, in addition to that, setting up community schools, which trying to connect the schools to the community, and a lot of what Tammy was talking about. How do we do that consistently where we're involving the community in the creation of quality education for our children, particularly in the elementary school level, but across K to 12. And then something that's not so much, is more in the youth development realm, but a $500 million investment in our public infrastructure, in our libraries, our recreation centers, and our playgrounds across the city. And it's a mammoth system, but it's been underfunded for decades. And so that's how that money is going to be used, and it's invested fundamentally in the youth of our city. In addition to that, in last year's budget, I don't know if people pay too much attention to this, the mayor passed legislation through council that would provide nearly $600 million new dollars to the school district over the next 5 years. And that is because and I don't know a lot about the state's sort of funding mechanism, somebody help me out here, it's their formula, thank you, the funding formula stinks, and if you're a poor urban area, you're done, you're screwed. So we know that, we're trying to change that, but when we take responsibility for this, we can't say we'll wait for the state to change their funding formula. We have to fund education at a higher level, and that's the commitment that the mayor and the city council made to the children of the city. So for my particular, and appoint a school board, that's, the mayor appoints the school board, and the school board is accountable to the mayor because he appointed them, and they have to be sort of approved by council, but they're the mayor picked, and if you have a smart mayor, he'll get most everybody he wants on the board. So the board's still figuring out its role, and they've just been around a little while, and they're doing a lot of work to figure out their role in this local control effort and funding that the mayor's put forward. So in our shop, we have said, how do we connect what we do in health, what do we do in recreation, what we do with DHS, what we do in the libraries, to the education agenda that the school district has. We have built a out-of-school time program with early literacy as its primary goal. So we have hundreds of out-of-school time programs in recreation centers and libraries across the city, funded by DHS, but with no outcomes, no educational outcomes. So we have adopted this SMART model, which is a proven early literacy program, and we're running that right now in 30 facilities across the system, in libraries, recreation centers, and in schools. And we're using this proven method that we hope, and we haven't measured our success, but we're in 30 schools, and we have 300 adult volunteers working in the program. So we're saying this is a civic venture. This is not a program for the school, but this is a venture that parents and adults from around the city can help kids read by fourth. So we're connecting, and we're trying to build more than just 2 years of pre-K, but we're trying to build a program that really works in the first to fourth grade and helps kids read at grade level by the fourth grade. We have also a Read by Fourth campaign, which is educating parents and communities about the importance of reading, the importance of language in the home and in the social settings across the city. So we're doing that. We're also working right now with the district on asthma, just trying to get the fuller, the broad framework that Tammy talked about. Asthma is the single biggest reason in the early years kids in Philadelphia miss school. It's the single biggest reason. So how does our public health department work with the district to not only provide in-school services that help kids manage their asthma, but how do we get into the homes and find a way to reduce the environmental causes of asthma in the home? So we're working there. We're working with our behavioral health services, not just to have the behavioral health services available to quell issues that happen during the day in school, but to use those tens of millions of dollars of resources to improve the classroom atmosphere. and to improve the way kids come to school, that they're ready to learn. So we're trying to turn that towards the district as well. And there's one more that has slipped my mind here, but I think I wrote it down. Oh, workforce. So we're doing middle school. We're trying to build a middle school out of school time program that is built around sports and arts. It's really about self-esteem, and it's hanging in there, the persistent model that you talked about. And then ultimately, we're trying to move into move the CTE programs in the district into our overall workforce strategy for the city. So we're in it for the long haul. I think we want to be guided by data, but we also have to act on sort of move and try things out, and have the courage to try things out, and to not be afraid of being evaluated and assessed at the end of that. And knowing that it really will take sort of a civic venture over time to have the impact that we want to make. That we know we can't do it alone. We're going to need universities like the University of Pennsylvania to extend, they're doing a lot, but to collaborate with them strategically around shared outcomes. We're going to have to get the business community, parents, neighborhood organizations to pull behind this, to make sure that that our children have an opportunity to learn. And if they do have an opportunity to learn and come in the classroom ready to learn, then they will ultimately succeed, and then we will succeed as a city. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mike. We could not do what we're doing in early childhood without partnership with the city. And the many city leaders and initiatives. And clearly in Philadelphia, we have a mayor that's very committed to education and very committed to early childhood. But Vivian, I think, started off by speaking about partnership, and I think that's really the crux of how we are going to be able to bring about any kind of change in this area, in this field. So there were a couple of other things that were mentioned. Tammy spoke about no quick fixes for children living in poverty. And then I really appreciated Sam sharing as well, giving a whole new frame to the fade out issue. That kids we don't start in preschool and end in preschool. And clearly that's a lot of the, there's a bit of energy now around pre-K and preschool, and much needed and much deserved and much wanted. But I think there's a recognition that it doesn't either start or end there. So I want to share a little bit with you about some of the initiatives, some of the work that we're doing from a nonprofit perspective and with other partners here in Philadelphia to impact the chances and life opportunities for children. And I'm not going to be able to touch on everything clearly, but one of the things that I do want to touch on, because we talk about quality, and why quality is so very, very important, is really because of everything that we've seen around the research for a child's brain, all the brain research. And even that brain research, though there's been a focus on pre-K, it clearly says from birth through. So we're really committed that we're tackling the whole span of time that really impacts children. And one of the ways that we're doing that in a variety of ways, focusing on the quality piece. A few years ago, after the Academy's report, we had philanthropy here in Philadelphia very generously funded our own workforce transformation work. And inside of that project, there were a number of action items for us. We saw there was a need to really work with higher ed. There was a need to really ensure that we had alternative pathways to credentialing teachers. There was a need to obviously focus in on teacher qualifications and how do we build quality within the system. And since in the last 3 years we've been focused on that, and generously, with many partners, and Public Health Management Corporation has really been in the city this group that has helped to really support and steer this work to ensure that we are delivering on the strategies that came out of that report. Namely, a couple of things that we've been doing. One of which is as we look at how do we grow the workforce, grow a highly qualified workforce. One of the strategies we've been looking at, how do we create this pipeline? Right now in Philadelphia, we now have an all early childhood and education high school in Parkway West, and a partnership with the Philadelphia Academies as well. Those students are now able to leave school with a child development associate. That first level of associate, that first level of certification, I'll say a credential, that can then take them into an associate's degree program. So that's a start, and then as a part of this project as well, we have started and launched a first of its kind and only of its kind, we believe, CDA to associate's degree apprenticeship program here in Philadelphia, with 1199C Training and Upgraded Fund taking the lead there. And then creating other partnerships like Community College of Philadelphia and Delaware County Community College and PHMC and other high ed partners and us at First Up to really provide this pathway for teachers to be able to move from not having a degree to having a degree. And we have our philanthropic partners, many, but mostly, William Penn Foundation and Vanguard has really supported that work and supported ensuring that we can have some kind of a structure in place that allows for having the most qualified, best prepared, most skilled people working with young children during their most formative years. So that work is well underway. And there are many other partnerships. Michael mentioned the Read by Fourth campaign. There's much work being done in the city with many partners to ensure that. And the qualifications aspect is met. PHMC just worked with the state to also get an alternative credentialing so that teachers can have an alternative to being able to get their teacher certification in place. So that, as Tammy mentioned, is well underway, and yet there is a danger, certainly, in focusing on qualifications without compensation. Yes? So we have this expectation, and rightly so, that the people working, because we know that those teacher-child interactions and the interactions with adults, that is the most significant factor that impacts the outcomes for children. So that is really important to focus on. But we have always lagged behind with focusing on, okay, great, how do we compensate teachers? I think you saw in the data that Tammy shared, a preschool teacher versus a first grade teacher, they make a third less. Two-thirds, well, the first grade teacher makes 3 times more. And clearly that doesn't work. Clearly that doesn't work when we're moving in a system, and our quality rating system here is Keystone Stars, where, within, I think it's a 7-year roll-in, the expectation will be that all lead teachers have a bachelor's degree. And not just lead teachers in the preschool or pre-kindergarten, but all lead teachers in a program. So there's much work to be done there as well. And so the work that we've been doing, let me share a little bit about that. We've had, as a group, as a coalition, and there are many nonprofit partners here in this city, Public Citizens for Children and Youth, Economy League, other partners who are part of a philanthropy-funded campaign called Pre-K for PA. And we run this campaign along with some other statewide partners. And we've had much success. Not nearly the amount of success we want, because pre-K is obviously very underfunded. We have 45% of eligible children, even in the city of Philadelphia, children who are eligible for publicly funded pre-K don't have access to quality publicly funded pre-K. So there is a gap. But we've had some success in that over the last 4 years of this campaign, the governor has increased funding in mostly an administration where funding for most other programs have stayed flat or have decreased. They've been increased by more than $100 million in the last 4 years. And that is absolutely fantastic. And where we're moving now is we see the need, because in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia, we have what we call a mixed delivery system. Pre-K programs aren't just delivered, mostly are not delivered in schools within a K-12 system. Pre-K programs are mostly delivered within, I'll say, entrepreneurial enterprises. Small business owners, nonprofit leaders run childcare programs And pre-K programs are part of those. And you can imagine, given that it's not publicly funded, those parents can't afford to pay necessarily the true cost of care, which could be, if you're thinking about infant toddler with the required ratios, anywhere from $15,000 to $19,000 or so per child for an infant and toddler. And parents can't afford to pay that. So there's a real need to do this campaign. So we've actually started, the partners, many of whom have been on the Pre-K for PA campaign with some additional partners, have launched a new early learning campaign, a childcare campaign that we're calling Start Strong PA. And for those of you who are providers in the room, this Thursday we're going to have a couple of launch calls to share some more about this campaign. But it's designed to address quality, access, compensation, the whole gamut. And where we're starting is by working and ensuring that all of the people who serve children are fully aware and they've been a part of this campaign, they've been a part of the design of it, but we need to get the word out. And one of the things that we need partners. We need non-traditional partners included in this work. And we need more forums like this where we are able to share about the work and where people can have access to understanding some more about the issues around childcare and more about the kind of system that we have in Pennsylvania where they can jump in. Just a quick little story to share. We, a year or two ago, we started this partnership with Temple University and their economics students. And we had some staff who did some co-teaching of an economics course there at Temple around the cost of early childhood programs. And it was unbelievable because now we have these economics students that they've worked with and they're trained, and these economics students now go into programs and they're working with the directors. More importantly for me, they're understanding more and more about this field, about the cost. And these 20, 22-year-olds, 5 to 10 years out or less, we don't know, we'll see, this is gonna be a very personal issue for them. And it's become a very personal issue now, as they've been appalled. And we need more of that. We didn't do this program having that kind of a sleeper result, so to speak, but it was an unexpected benefit. So we quite clearly see the many, many benefits that come from engaging multiple stakeholders in this dialogue. And my time is well up. But if you're interested in any way in partnering or finding out more, absolutely see me, because even if you're not from the early childhood field, there are many ways we can work together and perhaps point you in the direction of another nonprofit even, where you can work to promote and advance what we care about. Thank you.
Okay, now we want to hear from our audience. I just would like to ask you just a simple question, because we're going to show you how absurd the short amount of time we're going to have for our audience is. If you were moved by something that was said in this time of our speakers and respondents, raise your hand. If something moved you, okay, look around. Okay, if something moved you, I'm really convinced of the 2 W's. The will is more important than the way, because we really need to basically have, it's no coincidence that we're talking about this before election, and that we're really talking about the will that we have to make a difference, and how incredibly short the timeline is for the children who need it. So we want to ask you, if you have a question, we're going to have some treats, and we're going to go to I love to be in the law school, because then we can adjourn you to the Great Hall. We're going to go to the Great Hall to have refreshments. So we'll have an opportunity for some informal conversations. But if anyone has a question that they would like to address to any one of our panelists, please, there are mics available in both corners. Both corners there, the mics are available. So if you would like to ask a question, or if you would like to make a brief comment, okay, please do so. I think we have some dear souls who will come to the mic. Okay, Keith.
Yes, this is a question for Dr. Marcells. And are you aware of the study that Kenneth Dodge did recently about cohort effect in fade out? And if so, would you care to comment about it? If you see that as being a
Cohort effect?
yes.
Ken Dodge, I'm afraid not, no.
Okay. Well, I think it's a very interesting paper. It's in the Journal of Child Development, I think, May 2017, and they followed almost 1 million children in preschool programs in the state of North Carolina because of the data warehouse that they have, and because of the various timings of things being faded in. They were able to draw some conclusions about fade out. What he concluded was that there was, in fact, not a fade out if the cohort that they were with also had pre-K. So evidently, he was concluding that two effects: one, the interaction of the children with each other, and the other, the teachers who were actually prepared for these children that had gone through pre-K and were able to kind of push them forward in the system.
Well, I will definitely read that, and I'm
Okay.
embarrassed not to know it, I should. And it's very interesting because I do think that you've hit on two elements that are very important. One is the child-child interaction, but the other is the teachers seeing a group that comes in with skills that they're not accustomed to seeing necessarily, that changes the teacher behavior,
Yes.
I would suspect. And I don't know if Ken says that or not, but it's how I've seen that happen in the past.
Good. Thank
He
you.
does assert that, yes.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments? You please come down. There's a mic right there. These are very brave people who are willing to do this. We really love you.
Hi, my name is Christy Balka, and I work for the City of Philadelphia. I actually think that Mike and Carol were both modest, and I want to build on what each of them said and flesh it out a little bit, because when I travel outside of Philadelphia, the response that I get about the early childhood space is, my gosh, there really is a perfect storm in Philadelphia right now. And we know there's a perfect storm because over the last few years, the high-quality early childhood capacity has increased by about 50%, and the number of funded slots we have, mostly pre-K but also infant toddler slots, has increased by about 45%. We have a Running Start Health, which is a cross-disciplinary, cross-departmental collective impact project that focuses mainly on early childhood health. We have a Running Start Early Learning, which is similar in the early learning space. It's a very consciously public-private initiative to build access to high-quality early learning. And the Mayor's Office of Education right now is in the process of broadening its early childhood mission from pre-K to services for children from birth to 5. What I want to say is that this work is done with the deep involvement of many folks in the room, and as I look around, I see heads nodding, nonprofits, research institutes, funders, other city agencies, and of course, Penn and other academic institutions. So my message is, I think Mike and Carol, with all due respect, were being a bit modest, and a lot is happening in Philadelphia that's very much consistent with, or very congruent with the work that Sam and Tammy spoke about.
Thank you, Christy. Any other? Thank you. We need all the hope and trust and collaboration we can get, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
The question's primarily for Dr. Mann, but you talked about the perceived benefits you saw of pre-K being administered really in the private sector. So I'm just curious your thoughts on, with the concept of universal pre-K, is it something you feel like K-12 should take on, or perhaps continue to let happen in the private arena?
I don't see it as either or. I think really it's the community context that should drive where and how communities elect to make more access opportunities possible. I mean, in our community, the reality is that, for almost 20 years, our public schools did not see themselves in that space and place. And suddenly we had a superintendent from New Jersey who obviously came in with the Abbott experience and all that encompassed, and he really felt like it was important for the schools to be involved. And while that initially introduced an element of fear or concern with those organizations that have been actively involved in providing the services, the reality was children were not being served. And it was important for us as a community to not allow our fear for, am I going to lose in this, to stand in the way of more children being served. And so we have found a way to do this work together. We're actually now aligned across our curriculum frameworks that we're using, whether it's in the public schools or in the private community. We have for-profit and not-for-profit providers committed to wanting to make access possible for families with limited resources. And we think that it's important for each community to look at and examine what it makes best sense to do. We had a slight hiccup with our third superintendent who wanted to build preschool centers as a part of the strategy to sort of put the stake in the ground around the schools as sort of the place, and everybody else, sort of fall away. But because we had built a strong way of thinking about this work in our communities, we were really able to, I won't say stand that down because that wasn't the point of it, but when you really looked at the capital resources that were required to push a vision like that against everything else our schools needed, financially, it made no sense. And people were able to see that because we chose to focus on, okay, we need to look at what we have, really the resources to do and sustain, and how is that going to truly help sustain what we needed to have happen. And so there's no right or wrong way. I think the work that Sam referenced around school as hub and what they're trying to do in Nebraska makes sense based on where they're situated, but every community has to have that conversation and figure that out. It is collective for us, and that's been a long time coming, because when I got there, people were like, stay away from that one, there's your competition. And I just thought, how do we think about children in that way? Whether they're being served by us or served by you, they're being served, and I care about what that experience is like because they're children. They're children in our community, and so you have to really press people to go at it from that point of view hard.
Okay, yes, we have another person. Yes, please.
I can't use the microphone. I really enjoyed all of what all four of you had to say, so it's a question kind of for everyone. But across from all the different perspectives that you all brought here, it's clear that some of the central problems have been really well articulated and clearly defined. Whether that's kind of systemic issues about poverty and income inequality across the country, complexities about how politics plays into that, funding as just a general problem. But I'm, I guess, wondering, coming from a perspective of a researcher, is what questions haven't been answered yet that would help us push forwards this field of child well-being in this educational sphere. So whether that's on the ground, practically what questions can we answer, or a more big picture, where can we move research as a field? What can we do next to improve the lives of kids, basically, as researchers?
Well, let me start. The fact is that we have an enormous amount of research about early childhood intervention, and most of it is supportive of the interventions. We have almost no research about 8th grade, or 2nd grade, or 11th grade physics. I mean, maybe there is, I don't know. But my point is simply that over and over again, we ask this question, is this efficacious? Should we invest? Is this where public dollars belong? This is being asked at a time when the vast majority of parents are in the workforce. In Nebraska, 66% of women with infants are working. And I can go through a ton of data, and you'll have a ton more data here. And then you ask this other question, return on investment. Business people don't like to put their money anywhere where there's no return on investment. That would be the end of business for them. Well, we have evidence about return on investment. We have a lot of evidence about return on investment. What we don't have is a public commitment to support that return, what we know. So, there might be a sociological study out there to figure out, why are we so reactive to this? Why is it that we can't be convinced when most of the Western world certainly is convinced that this is the right thing to do for young children? So you heard in my voice frustration and maybe even a little bit a tinge of anger, because I'm really irritated, to say the least, by this, because we don't have forever. And we have a lot of data here, enough data that tells us, move forward, do this well.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, my wish to want to situate this in a broader context, honestly speaking, is because, I don't want to see early childhood run the risk of 5-10 years down the line someone saying, you see, that was a waste of money. It still didn't change anything, right? Because we're into magical thinking about how to make things better. And I think Sam's comment about commitment is critical. I've started to really try to dissect. There are certain ideas we have in our society about what we value. And we don't have science to substantiate it, right? We don't have science that talks about the importance of granting certain tax benefits to certain populations, right? We don't have a science that supports that. We have values that undergird it, because we believe that, there are certain things that if we do them, maybe it's gonna stimulate the economy. And but we don't have a lot of really hard evidence if you look at sort of how wages have grown or not grown. And I don't mean to be political, but I'm just looking at this just plainly. And the will that Sam talked about is a challenge for us as a nation. And I don't know what it's going to take to get people to be at a place of recognizing that now is our moment, our time, to really help set children of this generation and generations to come on a path that is going to allow them to enjoy benefits that those of us who have, traveled that road enjoy. And it's very disconcerting to think that our inability to see that, the hurdles we put in place for people who are struggling. You make one dime more, and I'm sorry, I think we need to take that benefit away. Who does that? Why do we do that? Do we? It's so sociological.
Psychiatric.
Okay, we have one more question or comment.
Yes, hi. My name's Debbie Johnson, and I am a Philadelphia born, bred, and educated person. And I've been in education 48 years. And thank you for presenting your perspectives, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, even though that's my name, but let me just give you a quick snapshot of my travel here in Philadelphia and being educated. I'm a Penn graduate. I also I'm a professor now, but this is one of the things that I want to say. One of the things, and it's a good segue for what you were just saying, and that is, you can't teach a person to care and love. And we don't do enough with the value systems and the beliefs that we are educating the babies. And until we really get that and understand that dispositional postures have to be an innate, natural ability and concern to take care of these children. Because even with the programming that's out here, if the poor families don't adhere to every nth of the law, they're kicked out of those programs. And I'm talking about Head Start programs and subsidized programs. If they don't go every week, and if they do this and they want to make sure who's in the house, it reminds me of the 60s welfare program. And if you really want to get some money out of the system here, you have the poor people paying for their own education. Don't tax the soda, tax the water. The people who really drink a lot of water, that's who can afford it. The black and brown children are not. That's right. You see all the water bottles in here? That is who. It's not soda and Pepsi. It is water. So that has been a controversy, and because I live in the suburbs now, what they're doing is they come across the line, buy all their sodas and everything that has sugar in it, and come back to Philly. So tax the water. But my real comment is, and I'm really into dispositional research right now, is we have to change our attitudes, our belief systems, and how we approach not just the poor children and the black and brown children and all that. I don't know if I believe all that brain stuff, because that's saying too, that's a whole other thing that's going on with discrimination to me. But caring for our kids is the challenge. Loving our children is the challenge. And it doesn't matter if they're rich kids, white, black, brown, or poor kids. We have to have a character class. We have to have something that instills in our political infrastructure that says, guys, here's our future. We say that stuff, but it really does make a difference how you care. And that's my comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're just about ready to go to some more informal conversation. I just want to see your hands again, people who felt that they were moved by something that was said. So the question is, what do you do with that, right? What do you do with what? So your heart's been touched, your mind's been touched. What do you do with that? Well, this is a point for us. What Vivian and I came together is that we really need to have awareness, right? We need to be touched, but the awareness has to lead to responsiveness, and responsiveness needs to lead to really collaborative problem solving. So the question is, what do you do? Each one of you, as our colleague just said, if your heart's touched, each one of you has a responsibility to think about how you're going to collaboratively and confluently respond, whether it's a political response, whether it's a project response, whether it's somehow, we're all in organizations. How do we move our organizations? I'm very frustrated with the people who pay my salary, because I believe research universities, there's been a disconnect between the knowing community and the doing community, and that we don't have enough actionable, usable knowledge. We got a lot of knowledge that university people purport, but the question is, what do they know about the day-to-day implementation of that knowledge? Because I'm telling you, the devil lives there. And so unless you go there, you cannot do consistent, persistent intervention unless you know how your laboratory intervention actually plays out. It may be BS. So the question is, we've got to cross these lines and figure out how to create these collaborations. And I really believe, Vivian and I, we did not want to create just another opportunity for folks to talk. And the folks we brought their hearts. They brought their minds, and now we need our backs, right? Heart's not enough, mind's not enough, we need our backs combined with that. And I don't know how that translates for you, but it makes me want to get on my knees as a good old Baptist and basically say, God help us, and how we can find each other to come together. It's very, very hard. It's like herding cats in university. Just ask Pam.
Thanks, John. I think we are seeing this just as an activity to bring us together, to remind us of both our kind of intellectual mission, but also our personal mission. And so I like to end these events by asking, what does it matter that we were here today on this day in this place? And what difference can we make as we go forward? We really thank you. We were honored to have you here today, and we look forward to working with you. There was a lot of talk about alliances and partnerships and collaborations, and we look forward to being able to be engaged in that kind of work. And for me to be able to continue to work with John and try to make a difference.